Welcome to Introduction to Machine Learning. From this lecture onward, for the next few lectures, we will be talking about unsupervised machine learning. Before this, we were talking about supervised learning, where the target values for each sample were given. Now we will not have the target values for each sample, yet we would want to make some representation, learn some representation of the given sample so that those representations are useful in some sense. So let's look at those criteria. The first one that we will talk about is clustering, and let's dive into it. So the objectives of this module would be to list applications of clustering, obviously understand what is clustering first, and then write the objectives and algorithms for certain ways of doing clustering. Okay, and then list the methods to assess goodness of clustering. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what is the objective of clustering. So let's say we are just given a bunch of sample points without any labels, without any target values. So let's take an example. So let's say you have x1 and x2 dimensions. So this is x1 and this is x2. And within that, all we are given are several sample points. And what we want to do is we want to find out whether these sample points belong to natural groups of some sorts, natural subsets of some sort. So what you can see from here is probably that it looks like these points belong to one group, right? And these points belong to another group, and we cannot say about the 3 points that are lying outside these two groups. So what is the criteria for defining these groups? What are some algorithms to find these groups? That is basically what we will be looking at. And why is it useful? There are several reasons why it could be useful. There are different applications of clustering. Sometimes we just want to find natural groups. So imagine you have a company and you want to have marketing forces that go after different market segments using different strategies. There are certain market segments where you want to play the numbers game with more efficient targeting of each customer. Then there are certain segments where each customer brings you more revenue, so you want to give them specialized treatment and so forth. So this market segmentation is a very classic exercise in business, where we don't know a priori that what segment to assign to each customer. We just have customers and we have some data features about them. For example, we may know the revenue per customer, we may know the profit per customer, we may know the volume, we may know how much time they spend in our store, we may know how much time, how many times they come to our store, and so forth. So with all these different variables that we know about the customer, we may want to segment them into some natural groups and then form sales teams or marketing teams that go after individual segments, and their strategies would be very tailored to that segment as opposed to a generic customer. So finding these natural groups becomes a very important exercise in that case. Another example could be to reduce the data and deal with only a typical sample from that particular subset of data. So let's take the example of cancer. So let's say we have different patients. We have patient 1, patient 2, patient 3, and so forth, and patient N. And then on the other hand, for each patient we have gene 1, gene 2, up to gene D. Okay, so we have so many different genes and patients, and these all have some values. So in some sense we have a matrix, just like the data matrices that we have been talking about, but we don't have any target value associated with every row of the matrix. So it's an unsupervised problem. What we would like to do is to say that these patients look alike and they will benefit from one type of therapy versus some other set of patients that look alike in their gene expression and they would benefit from another type of therapy. So the targeted therapies for subtypes of cancer could be based on clustering of gene expression. On the other hand, we can also cluster genes itself. So we can even cluster genes that these genes appear to be switched on or off together, whereas these genes appear to be switched on or off together. So we could cluster in both dimensions, both the sample dimension as well as the gene dimension, or the patient dimension as well as the gene dimension. And you will see in some biological literature, you will see a two-way clustering where both genes and patients are clustered. So it's quite a useful exercise in those fields where we are doing knowledge discovery, right? So in supervised machine learning, we knew the target values for every sample, and we were trying to fit a model that will predict the target value for test samples. Here we want to discover natural groups or natural ways of representing data given the raw data. Another example of an application would be to find outliers. So if you have different samples that look alike and another set of samples that look alike, and then you have another sample that is not like any of these, then if we do the clustering, we may find that this is one cluster, this is another cluster, and this is either a cluster or a small cluster or an outlier on its own, and it actually belongs to some, it is an outlier as far as most of the data is concerned. So an example would be that if you are looking at cars, right, and you are looking at their size, their power, their speed, and their doors and so forth, it's possible that most of the two-door cars cluster in a certain speed and acceleration dimension also, whereas the four-door cars are in another cluster, whereas there might be only one or two models of three-door cars which are outliers in that case. So it also basically goes down to modeling the density or probability density of the data, the joint probability density across all the variables of the data. When you are looking at this joint probability density, the contours of density could be multimodal, and each mode itself is representative of one cluster. And wherever you see low density regions and one or two points there, those could be the outliers. So there is a good connection between density estimation and clustering. So we will look at density estimation also later in the course, but now let us start with clustering. So clustering is actually not an easy problem because it is an unsupervised problem. Let's take an example. So let's say we have a bunch of data points. So let's say we have these data points. So if someone asks you how many clusters are there in this set of samples, then it's hard to say whether these are 4 clusters or 3 clusters or 2 clusters. All of these could be right answers depending on what you are looking for. If you are looking to have only a few clusters, then probably the 2 clusters that you see are these 2. Right? If you are looking to find a more number of clusters, then probably you have these 4 clusters. Right? And it's also possible there's an intermediate where where these 2 clusters are actually one cluster, but the other 2 clusters are 2 separate clusters, so we have 3 clusters. Another possibility could be that we do such a fine job of clustering, such fine cutting of the clusters, that each point becomes one cluster. So in general, you can, if you have n samples, you can have n clusters, or you can have one cluster. So you can have anywhere between 1 to n clusters. Now which of those are good, we don't know, right? So that there is no one answer for every problem, but depending on what prior assumptions we have about the data, what prior assumptions we had about what is a good cluster, there are different, you can get different answers. Another example could be that, let's take another set of samples. So let's say now we have points that form a line, right? And then we have another set of points that form a line which is close to the same line, right? So in this case, there is a possibility that you might want to consider this to be one cluster and this to be another cluster, whereas it's also possible that you may want to consider these set of points as one cluster and these set of points as another cluster. So the correct answer is not obvious, and it all depends on what is our prior assumption and what is our application in mind, what is our utility in mind when we are doing clusters. But keep in mind that if you have n points, you can have anywhere from 1 to n clusters. Let's start with the most popular clustering algorithm, which is the k-means clustering algorithm. Basically, the idea of this algorithm is that we will take all the endpoints that we have and we will do a hard partitioning into one of k clusters. And this k is something that is fixed. We will assume that we know k. So k is your hyperparameter. It's a hyperparameter. So this is something that you choose before you begin the algorithm. And once we have chosen the algorithm, the objective of the algorithm is to minimize the sum of squared distance from the cluster center. So there are a couple of words to unpack here. So first of all, what is a cluster center, right? And then sum of squared distances from each point's own cluster center. So what I mean by that is that, let's say you have points xi, where I ranges from 1 to n, and then you have clusters small k ranging from 1 to capital K. Okay, so basically what we will say is that for each point xi, it belongs to some cluster. Okay, it belongs to some cluster ck. Okay, and if xi belongs to ck, this implies that xi does not belong to cj, where j is not equal to k. Okay. So what that means is there is hard partitioning. The point cannot belong to more than one cluster, and the point will belong to at least exactly one cluster. Let's put it that way. So xi will belong to exactly one cluster. So let's take the set of points. Okay, sk. Sk is the set of points or set of samples belonging to ck. Okay, so this is all the points that belong to the cluster ck. So what we want to do is we want to minimize. Okay, minimize by changing ck, minimize over ck the sum of squared distances. So we will have I and sum over k, small k. Okay, and we will have an indicator function, and this indicator function is xi belongs to ck. So only then this is 1, otherwise it is 0. And what we will do is we will take the difference of xi minus mu k squared. What is mu k? Mu k is the centroid. Okay, so mu k is the centroid, is equal to 1 over ck, all the number of points within ck. And we will basically take this xi indicator function, xi belongs to ck, and we will take xi. Okay, so if we take all the points and we that belong to one cluster, and we take their average location, that is the centroid. So this is your centroid, and this is the objective. Now whether it meets this objective or not is a different question. It tries to meet the objective, but it may not always meet the objective. It may not always find locations in the space where the clustered centers minimize the distance from their respective points. So let's look at it in a more visual way, and that will help us define how we are trying to meet this objective. So let's say you have a bunch of samples that are given. Okay, so we have some samples that are closer to each other here, and then we have another set of samples that are closer to each other here. So how will we find these cluster centers that are that minimize the sum of square distances from their own points? So initially we would not know any of these, right? We would not know what these cluster centers are. So let's say we randomly initialize, or let's say we end up at some point deciding two cluster centers, and let's say k is equal to 2. So somehow we figured out that a good k is 2. We did not select k is equal to 3. We did not select k is equal to 4. Somehow we started with k is equal to 2. And let's say one of the points is here, okay, and the other point is here. All right. So the first thing that we will do is we will find out which points belong to which cluster. So what we will do is, if you look at these 2 points and I join them with a line, and this line, on this line I compute a perpendicular bisector. Okay, so let's say that perpendicular bisector is here. So let me draw this line bold. So this line defines, on one side of the line everything is closer to one centroid, one cluster center, and on everything on the other side every point is closer to the other centroid, right? So basically this defines the membership of all the points. So these are all belonging to, now let's take a different color. So here all these points, they belong to the square centroid, because they are closer to the square centroid as opposed to the triangular centroid. On the other hand, so here let me expand this. Actually it is going to include some other points also. It's going to include these points also. Whereas if I look at all the points that are circled by red, right, they belong to the triangular centroid, and because they are now closer to the triangular centroid as opposed to the square centroid. So this defines the membership of each sample point. So each sample point either has the membership to cluster 1 or to cluster 2. Alright. So because it has one of those two memberships, now I can recompute the centroids for cluster 1 and the centroid for cluster 2. So when I recompute, right, so this centroid will shift towards the center of where majority of the points are, and it will not be exactly there because of this outlier. We have an outlier here, but it will shift closer to this point, whereas the square centroid will shift closer to these other points, but it will have these two outliers that are basically changing which are preventing it from being exactly at that center. However, once these are shifted, right, then my partitioning of the cluster changes. So this partitioning of this cluster changes, and my next blue line will be something like this. Okay, the next blue line that basically partitions the points into two different cluster centers will change, and now it looks more natural. The division of the points between cluster 1 and cluster 2 looks more natural, and because of that, in the next iteration I might be able to find the exact centroid of the two natural clusters that I can see on the screen. So basically my line will shift. Okay, so that is the visualization, and in the end basically the clusters that I will get will most likely look like this, and it will look like this. Sorry. Okay, so if we want to write this more formally, so we will have some iterations, right? So basically we will have an iteration loop, and its terminating condition would be when there is until little change in centroid locations, until change in centroid locations is less than some tolerance epsilon. Okay, so this will be the iteration loop. Within the iteration loop, what we will do is, so before the iteration loop, we will randomly initialize centroids. Okay, then within the iteration loop, what we will do is, number one, compute membership of each point. So what is membership? Basically, we will look at the difference between xi and all cj, so or all mu j's, right? Let's call this mu1, let's call this mu2. Okay, so we will compute the distance between, so we will find basically argmin over j of xi minus mu j, or let's just call it distance d of xi comma mu j for each I. Okay, so whichever j minimizes that is the cluster to which the point xi belongs. Alright, and then we will do one more thing. We will recompute mu j for all j. Okay, so we will recompute and we will reinitialize, we will find the cluster centers again. So now this will be based on the centroid computation. How will number one work? So this is number one. How will number two work? Number two is that mu j is equal to 1 over cj membership, right? And sum of the sum of xi if xi belongs to cj. All right, so it's just basically a centroid computation. So that is the entire, not just a single iteration, but the entire algorithm for k-means.